All right, so you're getting ready to vote for the first time. Pretty cool, right? It's a big deal. For this deep dive, we're going to take a look at this Reddit post from, Serpix.
Okay.
And the title, it's kind of straightforward. I voted for the first time and voted for the person that doesn't lie about everything. Simple, right?
Yeah.
It's got a picture of, well, you know how those classic cars from the 90s had those like tan cloth seats? It's one of those, like the inside of the car.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can picture that.
But what's really interesting is the comment section. I mean, it's like this whole world, Internet politics, funny, confusing, and sometimes, honestly, a little bit scary.
I can imagine. Just thinking about all the comments on any given political post is, well, yeah, scary is a good word for it.
Yeah, it can get intense. But it's also super fascinating how this, simple statement about voting can unleash this torrent of opinions and jokes and everything in
It
between.
really is. It's like everyone's, projecting their own anxieties about politics onto this first-time voter.
Totally. It's like a Rorschach test for the internet age. Like, what do you see in this seemingly innocent post? And the answers are all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. And they run the gamut from lighthearted to seriously out there. We're talking hurricane control, Jewish space lasers. I mean, you name it, it's probably in this thread.
Oh, it's definitely there. We're going to get into all of that.
Okay.
So let's unpack this together and see what we can learn, especially, since you're heading to the polls for the first time yourself. This is kind of like a guide to the political wilderness of the internet.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
And a very timely one, I'd say. So where should we start?
Well, I guess let's start at the beginning, right? With the original post. The user, Bobby Thang, seems pretty excited to vote, which is awesome.
Yeah, you can definitely sense that enthusiasm.
But it's that one line, the person that doesn't lie about everything, that just becomes this lightning rod.
It's so interesting how such a simple statement can become so loaded.
Right. Some people love it, others hate it, and then there are those who just dive headfirst into, full-on conspiracy theories.
It really highlights how divided we are,
Yeah.
even on something as fundamental as voting.
Absolutely, and that's where the humor comes in. Like, you see comments like, I voted for the person who can control hurricanes. Clearly, poking fun at this idea that politicians have that kind of power.
Oh yeah, that one got a chuckle out of me.
Right. But it also kind of hints at this deeper anxiety, right? About what happens when people in power, well, abuse that power.
Exactly. It's like a nervous laugh masking a genuine concern.
And it totally reminds me of that whole Sharpie incident from a few years back. Remember when, well, a certain someone might have, shall we say, enhanced a hurricane map with a Sharpie.
Oh, how could I
Yeah.
forget? I think that image is seared into all of our collective memories.
Right. So when you see those jokes about like controlling hurricanes with Sharpies, it's tapping into that shared memory, turning something controversial into this dark humor shorthand.
It's amazing how online communities can do that. Take something that happened years ago and make it instantly relevant to current events.
And speaking of things that keep popping up, can we talk about the whole Jewish space laser thing?
Yeah, this one's a bit tricky because it touches on the very real danger of misinformation and conspiracy theories, especially those targeting, well, specific groups.
Absolutely, we have to acknowledge that. But I mean, within this thread, at least some of the comments seem to be using humor to kind of address, maybe even debunk this theory, right?
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. Like you see people joking about getting their turn with the space laser or talking about the annual meeting of the, and I quote, Zionist cabal that controls
Oh,
everything.
yeah, that one. It's so over the top, right? You can tell it's satire, like they're trying to highlight the absurdity of the whole conspiracy.
Right. And that's a fascinating dynamic we see a lot online, how humor can be used to both engage with and undermine these harmful ideas.
Definitely. It's complex, for sure. Okay, but before we get too serious, we got to talk about Arnold Palmer's. But, like, let's just say a certain part of his anatomy that one of the candidates decided to bring up.
Oh, right. That was a choice.
You might not be familiar with this one, but trust me, it was a weird moment in the campaign.
If we're talking about the absurdity of political discourse, that anecdote definitely takes the cake. I mean, who brings that up?
I know, right? And the fact that people are referencing it on Reddit, on a thread about voting, no less, just shows you how these things seep into the online world and become part of the conversation.
It's almost like a shared cultural experience, even if it's a bizarre one.
It really is. And I love that one commenter said they specifically voted for the person who didn't talk about that subject.
Yeah, there's something refreshing about that. Like, amidst all the crazy, people are still looking for a bit of, decency and respect in their politicians.
For sure. Okay, let's shift gears for a second and talk about something a little more lighthearted. Remember that contest they had in Michigan to design a new I voted sticker?
Oh, yeah. The one with the werewolf.
That's the one. It became a total internet sensation,
It was
right?
everywhere. It was all over my social media feeds for weeks.
And the comments on this thread are loving it. Some people are reminiscing about old I voted stickers, and some are even suggesting turning them into collectibles.
It's funny how something so simple can become this symbol of, civic engagement and pride.
It really is. Okay, but beyond the jokes and, the sticker obsession, there are some pretty intense undercurrents running through this thread.
Yeah, you're right. Beneath all the humor, there's this sense of, well, unease.
It makes you think, right? About the state of things, about political discourse, especially as someone, getting ready to vote for the first time.
You're stepping into this world at a very, let's say, interesting time.
It definitely feels that way.
It does. And I think it's important to acknowledge those deeper anxieties and tensions because they can help us understand the challenges, but ultimately the importance of participating in a democracy.
I agree. And there's a lot to unpack there. So let's dive into that a little bit further.
All right, let's do it. One of the things that really jumps out at me from this thread is just, how polarized everything feels.
Yeah.
People are so quick to jump into these debates and, make assumptions about what the other person believes based on, well, very little.
And it's like everyone's already picked a side. Right.
Right.
And they're not really budging.
Exactly.
Which, I guess that makes it hard to have a real conversation, doesn't it?
It really does.
Especially, when you're trying to figure things out for yourself. Like, as a first-time voter, you're coming into this and it's just like, bam.
And along with that polarization, there's this, undercurrent of, distrust
Ooh, yeah.
in authority. You see it in the comments about, the globalist cabal,
Yeah.
the deep state, even those jokes about politicians controlling the weather with Sharpies.
It's like everyone's a little bit suspicious of, well, everyone.
Yeah, and I guess in a way it makes sense, right?
It's not like we haven't seen examples of politicians failing to, keep their promises or institutions not really serving the people they're supposed to.
Yeah, there's definitely a history there.
But then it becomes this well, how do you know who to trust, what information to believe? Especially, when you're just starting to figure out this whole political thing.
It's a real challenge, and I think that's where, the whole issue of misinformation comes in.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The Jewish space laser thing, that's just one example.
Right.
But you see it in other comments, too, like people referencing debunked claims about, election fraud, the effectiveness of vaccines.
It's everywhere.
It really is.
It's it's a reminder that even in a place where people are just trying to be funny, these really harmful ideas can take root and spread.
It's kind of alarming when you think about it.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like this Reddit thread is like a microcosm of what's happening in, the bigger political world.
A little mini version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got the passion, the engagement, but also the division, the suspicion.
The constant battle over what's real and what's not.
It's a lot, especially for someone voting for the first time.
It really is.
Have you ever come across a conspiracy theory or something online that just made you question everything?
Oh, absolutely. Especially in the early days of, doing research for this show.
Yeah.
It's so easy to fall down those rabbit holes where, everyone's agreeing with each other and it all seems to make sense.
Right.
But then you take a step back and you're like, wait, what am I actually reading here?
Yeah. It takes real effort to step outside of that echo chamber and be like, okay, let me actually check my sources.
It's a skill for sure, and one that's becoming more and more important.
Absolutely. But it's interesting. I think this thread, as crazy as it is, it actually gives us some good tips.
Oh, yeah?
For navigating this whole information overload situation.
Like what?
Well, for one, it reminds us that humor, it can be a powerful tool.
Oh, for sure.
To deflect, to cope, to just point out how ridiculous some things are.
To connect with people who, share your view of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
You think about the hurricane jokes, the space laser satire, even the Arnold Palmer comments.
Right.
It's like laughter becomes this way to, process the madness of it all.
And find common ground. Right.
Yeah, even when you totally disagree with someone politically, you can still share a laugh about the absurdity of it all.
Exactly. It's like this shared human experience.
But, it's important to remember that humor is subjective.
Sure.
What one person finds funny, another person might find, offensive or even harmful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So being aware of that, the context and the impact of what we're saying especially online where things can be, well, so easily misinterpreted. It's crucial.
It's like humor's great, but use it wisely.
Exactly.
So, okay, humor, check. What else can we learn from this thread? Especially when it comes to, like, being a more informed voter.
I think it really highlights the importance of just, thinking critically.
Oh, yeah, critical thinking, that's huge.
When you're bombarded with so much information, especially online, you got to question everything.
Don't just take it at face value.
Right?
Look for the evidence, consider different perspectives, and be wary of anything that seems, I don't know, too good to be true or too bad to be true.
Like if it's making you feel really good or really angry,
Yeah.
there's a good chance there's more to the story.
Like, do your own research. Dig a little deeper.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid to, change your mind if you find evidence that contradicts what you thought before.
And that brings us to another important point. The importance of finding reliable sources of information.
Yeah.
Whether it's, well-respected news outlets, fact-checking websites, experts in their fields.
Get your information from a variety of places.
Yeah, don't rely on, just social media or just one news source for everything.
Be an informed citizen.
Make up your own mind.
But it can be tough, right? Especially when you're starting out. It's like, where do I even begin?
It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
But starting with a habit of checking your sources, looking for multiple perspectives, and just being aware of your own biases, that's huge.
And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Oh, yeah. Questions are key.
If something seems fishy, well, it probably is.
Chances are.
It's about being, skeptical.
But not cynical.
Yeah, there's a difference.
Like questioning everything, but not assuming everyone's lying all the time.
Right.
It's about finding that balance.
Between, being critical.
And being open.
Yeah, to newer information, different ways of looking at things.
And, this thread, it also shows how important it is to just, talk to each other.
Respectfully, right?
Yeah, even when you disagree.
Even when you really, really disagree.
Because there are definitely disagreements in this thread, strong opinions, some pretty out there statements.
Oh, yeah.
But for the most part, people are responding to each other,
Yeah.
try to articulate their views.
Yeah, even with the, humor and sarcasm and all that.
And that's something I think we need more of these days, don't you?
Yeah, for sure.
It's not always easy.
No.
But it's a good reminder that even when everything feels so divided,
Yeah.
there's still room for conversation, for listening to each
It's
other.
an understanding.
Trying to understand, yeah.
Even if you don't agree with someone, you can at least try to see where they're coming from.
Exactly.
And maybe, just maybe, through those conversations,
Yeah.
we can start to, I don't know, bridge some of those gaps, find some common ground.
It's a nice thought.
Yeah. It might sound idealistic, but I think it's worth aiming for.
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we wrap up completely, I want to go back to our first-time voter friend, Bobby Thang. And that simple statement about voting for the person who doesn't lie about everything.
Right.
It seems so straightforward at first.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, it just opens up all this complexity.
It really does. And it was raised a big question for you.
Yeah.
You're getting ready to vote for the first time.
Yeah.
In a world where there's so much information and, misinformation.
It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you figure out what's true? How do
Yeah.
you make these choices?
Especially when it feels like everyone has an agenda, every fact is up for debate, and you can't even tell what's a joke and what's serious anymore.
Yeah, it's overwhelming, for sure.
It really is overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
But, I think acknowledging that is part of the process too. Like realizing that, yeah, it's complicated and there's not always a simple answer and there are a lot of different viewpoints out there and being open to engaging with them.
Yeah, even if they, make you think a little bit.
Exactly. It's not about finding the right answer. It's more about developing the tools to navigate this world where information is constantly changing and the truth is this slippery thing.
Right. Yeah, it's like building up your, I don't know, your mental immune system or something.
That's a great way to put it. And what's funny? I think this whole Reddit thread with all its craziness, it actually offers a little bit of hope.
Oh, how so?
Well, because even with all the disagreements and jokes and the occasional wild conspiracy theory, you can still sense that people are trying, trying to make sense of things.
Part of it all.
Right. They're sharing their thoughts, they're responding to each other, and ultimately they're going to vote.
Even if it's for, sometimes confusing or hilarious reasons.
It's messy, sure, but it's what we got.
Yeah, it's our system.
And so I think as you're about to cast your vote for the first time, the key takeaway here is Don't be afraid to embrace that messiness.
Like, don't let all the noise and the conflicting information get you down.
Exactly.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, but just remember those tools we talked about,
Yeah.
right? Like asking questions, seeking out different perspectives,
Fact-checking those really wild claims.
and remembering that your voice matters.
Your vote matters.
Yeah,
Because in the end, democracy really does depend on participation.
even when, or maybe especially when, it's a little messy.
And maybe even a little funny sometimes.
Yeah, gotta find the humor in it all, right?
Absolutely well said.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Congrats again on becoming a voter.
It's a journey.
It is,
Right
but
on
it's a
there.
journey worth taking. And hey, remember, even amidst all the chaos, every vote makes a difference.